The room fell silent as Haider's words sank in, a heavy realization dawning on the president. This man wasn't bluffing. And the potential fallout of Haider's evidence going public so close to the election would be catastrophic. The president looked over at Asif, who remained tense and reluctant, but the stakes were too high. With a reluctant nod, the president said, "Fine. I'll issue the pardon for all of you, Assad, Mansoor, Mustafa, and Sami. But I want your word that the evidence will never be released." Haider nodded. "You have my word. But there's one more thing," he added, his tone unyielding. "I want Mustafa released immediately." The president motioned to Asif, who, gritting his teeth, reached for his phone. Asif hesitated, visibly displeased with the situation, but ultimately made the call. "Release Mustafa," he ordered, his voice tight with frustration. "Now." Back in prison, Mustafa was pacing his cell, his mind racing with worry about his friends and whether he would ever see freedom again. But suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall. A guard approached his cell, unlocking it with a smirk. "Mustafa," he said, "you're free to go." Mustafa's face lit up with disbelief. "What? I'm free?" The guard nodded, grinning as Mustafa stepped out. Mustafa's joy was uncontainable, and he threw his hands up, shouting, "My friend Haider did it. Haider is the best." His voice echoed through the prison, the sound of his elation filling the corridors as he was escorted out. As Mustafa stepped into the open air, no one followed him. He was truly free. He followed Haider's precise instructions, moving quickly and carefully to the secure location that Haider had set up for him. The gravity of his freedom was beginning to sink in, and he couldn't wait to meet up with Haider again. Back in the president's office, Haider waited calmly as Asif reported Mustafa's release. Asif's frustration was clear in his tone, but Haider ignored it. He looked directly at the president, his expression resolute. "I'll hold up my end of the bargain. You'll have no more trouble from us. But remember, if anything happens to me, or if you break your word, the evidence will be released immediately." The president looked at Haider with barely concealed anger. "Your pardon will be signed a day before the election," he said, his tone laced with bitterness. "Until then, I expect you and your friends to stay quiet." Haider gave a slight nod, standing up and turning to leave. He had won this round, and now the final steps were in motion. Meanwhile, Assad and Mansoor were still safely hiding out, awaiting news from Haider. They had been anxiously following developments, aware that Haider was taking on enormous risks to secure their freedom. When they received word that Mustafa had been released, their spirits lifted. The plan was moving forward, and soon they would be able to reunite. That night, Haider sent a message to Mustafa, instructing him on their next steps and reinforcing the importance of staying under the radar. Mustafa followed every instruction to the letter, fully aware that any mistake could jeopardize not only his safety, but also the lives of his friends. Haider knew that the next few weeks would be critical. He would need to stay vigilant, watching for any sign of betrayal from the government. The president's promise was fragile, but Haider was prepared to act if anything went wrong. Days passed, and tensions continued to rise as the election drew closer. The president and his party were nervously tracking the public reaction to the recent political developments, and the stakes had never been higher. Haider remained in the shadows, watching every move the government made, ready to respond at a moment's notice. Assad, Mansoor, and Mustafa waited patiently, knowing that the end was near and that Haider's plans were about to come to fruition. The journey had been long and filled with unimaginable challenges, but Haider's unwavering determination had brought them this far. Episode 30. The Capture and the Cover-Up. When Mustafa arrived at the safe location, he found a carefully placed note along with an Iraqi passport. The note, written in Haider's distinct handwriting, read, "Mustafa, it's time to go. Take this passport and get to Iraq. For your safety, have your parents hide somewhere secure for the next 30 days until the elections are over." Mustafa understood the weight of Haider's message and, After a brief yet emotional farewell, he urged his parents to go into hiding, reassuring them that he would be safe. As Mustafa made his escape, Haider took a bold step back in Pakistan, returning to Swat with one last mission. He needed to connect with Afzal's family, specifically his wife, to get the critical information needed to locate Afzal's sister, Rani. Afzal's wife greeted him at the door with a mix of anger and grief, her eyes welling with tears as she remembered the last conversation she'd had with her husband before he left for Karachi and never returned. "Because of you," she said bitterly, "my husband went to Karachi, and he's dead now. You promised me he'd be safe." Haider, trying to keep his composure, placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I am truly sorry for your loss. Your husband was a good man who tried to help innocent people. It was an accident, and we believe, in our faith, that everything happens by God's will. We are all destined to leave this world one day. But I am here to fulfill the mission Afzal began. I need to find his sister, Rani. I promise to protect her and support you and your son financially, as much as I can." After a moment, she nodded, her resolve softening. She handed Haider the address of Rani's residence in Karachi, along with the look of a grieving widow who had lost everything. With the information in hand, Haider rented a car from Swat and began the long drive to Karachi, determined to secure the copy of the video Rani held. Meanwhile, Asif, the head of the CIA team in Pakistan, was hot on the trail, convinced that Assad and Mansour were hiding somewhere in Swat. While searching the area, he came across a mango stand with the same name that Afzal had used in Islamabad. Approaching the stand, Asif asked a local about its owner, who confirmed, this stand belonged to Afzal. He passed away recently in a car accident. His wife and son lived down the hill. Asif's suspicions grew, and without hesitation, he led his team down to Afzal's house. When Afzal's widow opened the door and saw Asif standing there, fear gripped her heart. Asif wasted no time, taking her son and holding a gun to the child's head. "Your husband's dead, but you don't want to lose your son, do you?" he sneered. "Tell me if Afzal had a second copy of the video. If you lie, he won't live to see another day." Terrified and helpless, she broke down and revealed the truth. "Yes, there's a second copy. Afzal's sister Rani has it. She lives in Karachi." Haider went to retrieve it. With that information, Asif released her son, but he wasn't finished. He ordered his team to take the woman and her child into custody, ensuring they couldn't talk to anyone else. Then, he and his agents headed directly to Karachi, determined to intercept Haider before he reached Rani. Rani's small home in Karachi had become a dangerous place, though she didn't know it. By the time Haider arrived, Asif's team was already there, having forcibly taken the video from her. In their ruthless attempt to cover up any loose ends, Asif ordered his agents to kill Rani, ensuring that she could never speak out. Haider, still unaware of what awaited him, approached Rani's house, hoping to find the crucial evidence that could clear his friends' names. But as he stepped through the front gate, he found himself face to face with Asif, waiting with a twisted smile. Well, look who decided to join us," Asif sneered, crossing his arms. "Did you really think you'd get away with this?" Haider's face tightened, but he remained calm. "Do what you want, Asif. Kill me if you like, but I've already secured a plan. You can silence one man, but you won't silence the truth." Asif smirked, signaling his men to move in and arrest Haider. "Oh, I think we've silenced everything. You see, we have the video now. And without that, there's no evidence to back up your little story. We'll go on national television and tell the public that you're all frauds, just trying to save yourselves by making the government look bad." Haider didn't flinch. "The public isn't as naive as you think, Asif. They can see through your lies. But go ahead, tell your stories. Just remember that people know something's wrong when those who speak out disappear or have accidents. One day, the truth will come to light, and you and your superiors will have nowhere to hide." Asif laughed, but Haider's words seemed to unsettle him slightly. Regardless, he had the upper hand. Haider was swiftly taken into custody and thrown into an underground cell with no access to the outside world, no contact, and no way of knowing what was happening to his friends. The following day, the government made an official announcement that they had successfully captured Haider, the man allegedly responsible for masterminding the prison break and spreading lies about the government. Asif even took to national television, recounting the supposed shootout during Haider's capture and mentioned the recent death of Rani, Afzal's sister, labeling it as a tragic accident during the raid. "Let this be a message to all those fugitives who dare to defy our government," Asif warned, his gaze cold as he addressed the public. "We will bring you to justice, and any attempts to discredit the integrity of this nation will be met with the full force of our law." News of Haider's capture spread rapidly. Assad and Mansoor, still hiding in Iraq, saw the broadcast and felt a crushing sense of defeat. The man who had risked everything to help them had now become a prisoner himself, and the government's propaganda made it seem as though they had nowhere left to turn. Mustafa, who had made it safely to Iraq, also heard the news. His heart sank as he realized what this meant for Haider, and he worried about what would happen next. Haider had always been the one to lead, to plan, to execute. Without him, their future seemed bleak. In the depths of the underground cell, Haider lay on the cold stone floor, his thoughts racing. He knew the others would be devastated by the news of his capture, but he still held on to hope. He had left instructions, contingency plans, and had faith that his friends could stay strong and find a way to reveal the truth. Meanwhile, Asif felt emboldened by Haider's capture. He ordered an increase in security throughout Pakistan, confident that Assad, Mansoor, and Mustafa wouldn't dare return with Haider in custody. Asif believed that his mission was nearly complete, that he was just days away from capturing the remaining fugitives. But in Iraq, Mustafa wasn't ready to give up. Determined to find a way to free Haider, he began reaching out to his remaining contacts, hoping to secure support from anyone who might be sympathetic to their cause. He wouldn't let Haider's sacrifices be in vain. The election was drawing closer, and tensions in Pakistan were at an all-time high. The current government was desperate to secure victory, and they would stop at nothing to silence anyone who threatened their power. The question remained, would Haider's friends find a way to turn the tide, or would they be left to watch as their hopes for freedom were extinguished one by one? Haider, isolated and under constant surveillance, held on to the slim hope that his efforts had sparked something within his friends. In the darkness of his cell, he whispered a quiet prayer, trusting that, somehow, his story would not end here. Episode 32: A Hero's Return. Mustafa tried every avenue he could to discover Haider's location, hoping to bring some relief to their shared sense of loss and fear. But every attempt fell short, and the silence around Haider's capture weighed heavily on their hearts. One night, gathered in a small room with Sami, Assad, and Mansoor, Mustafa led them all in prayer, asking for Haider's safety and strength. They prayed that Haider's courage and sacrifices would not be in vain, and that somehow he would find a way to come back to them. In the midst of this uncertainty, Mansoor received a voice message from his father via Mustafa. "Next week, your mother is having her heart transplant at the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. She desperately wants to see you, if possible, even if just for a moment." Though the risk was high, Mansoor knew he couldn't deny his mother's last request. On the day of her surgery, he arranged a brief FaceTime call. When his mother saw his face, she smiled, her strength renewed. "Thank you, son," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Now I can go through this surgery with peace in my heart, knowing you're safe." On the adjacent bed, a Pakistani family was also waiting for a heart transplant surgery. Frida, a young woman caring for her ailing mother, overheard Mansoor's mother speaking softly to her son on the call. Curious and touched by the interaction, Frida began talking to Mansoor's father as they waited. He shared the heartbreaking story of how their sons had been falsely accused and used as political pawns by the government back home. "We had one last hope," he said, a recording held by a woman named Ronnie, who was the sister of Afzal, a brave man who tried to expose the truth. But Ronnie was killed, and the recording was taken by Asif, the head of the intelligence agency. Now, we have no way to prove our son's innocence. Frida listened intently, her heart heavy. Though she offered only kind words of sympathy, a storm of thoughts churned inside her. She was wife Asif. She had seen things that others hadn't. The reality hit her hard. Asif might be hiding this tape, concealing it to protect the corruption that her husband was part of. She didn't respond to Mansoor's father, but offered him a simple wish: may God protect your family. Later, after her mother's successful surgery, Frida returned to Pakistan. One evening, when Asif was away, she opened his locker. There, she found the USB drive with a video recording showing two men placing explosives in the bags of Asad and Mansoor. Watching the footage, her heart pounded with anger and guilt. She thought of her own son, just as innocent, and realized how vulnerable they all were to the corruption surrounding them. Determined to do the right thing, she took down Mansoor's contact number from her phone and called him. "I'm Asif's wife," she began, her voice steady. "I have the recording that can prove your kid's innocence. I'm willing to hand it over." Shocked and grateful, Mansoor's father quickly flew to Pakistan to retrieve the recording. Frida handed over the USB, her eyes filled with understanding and resolve. "Protect your son," she said, "and know that not everyone stands with the corruption surrounding this." With the recording in hand, Mansoor's father traveled to Iraq and reunited with Mansoor, Asad, Mustafa, and Sami. They decided to release the tape precisely 5 days before the election, exposing the truth to the public. As the recording circulated online, the country erupted in outrage. The explosive video evidence tore down the lies that had been upheld for so long, and the current government had no choice but to back down. Public pressure surged, making it impossible for them to manipulate the courts or delay justice any further. Salman Khan, the leader of PTI, Pakistan's true identity, rode this wave of public support and won the election in a landslide. The people celebrated in the streets, energized by the hope that justice might finally prevail. One of Khan's first actions was to order Haidar's release, recognizing the bravery and dedication he had shown in fighting against the unjust system. When Haidar stepped out of the prison, he was greeted with cheers from a crowd that had gathered to welcome him home. His friends were there, too, tears in their eyes as they embraced the man who had risked everything for their freedom. As Haidar looked around at the faces of the people he had saved, he felt a sense of peace and purpose settle over him. The sacrifice, the pain, the struggle, it had all been worth it. Days later, Haidar was invited to the presidential house. Walking through the grand hallways, he was reminded of the lengths he had gone to in his journey for justice. President Salman Khan welcomed him warmly, acknowledging his unwavering dedication to the truth. "Haidar," the president said, presenting him with a Medal of Honor, "Pakistan owes you a great debt. You showed courage in the face of corruption and did what most would never dare. Today, you stand here not only as a hero but as a symbol of justice for our nation." Haidar accepted the medal with a humble nod, knowing that the honor wasn't just for him, but for everyone who had fought alongside him, from Asad and Mansoor to Mustafa and Sami. They had all been part of a battle that went beyond personal gain, one that challenged the very foundation of corruption that had poisoned their country for too long. Over the coming months, Haidar worked tirelessly with the new government, helping to bring those involved in corruption to justice. Asif and other officials who had abused their power were arrested, tried, and convicted. The people of Pakistan, inspired by Haidar's bravery, began to believe in change and hold their leaders accountable. Haidar's legacy as a national hero grew, and his story became a beacon of hope and resilience for generations to come. Dr. Syed has written over 20 novels and books, many of which have become New York Times bestsellers and hold 5-star ratings at the Boston Public Library, the 5th largest library in the USA. One of his most acclaimed works, 11 Rules of Life, boasts a 5-star rating on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. Another standout, The Micro Shifts is a transformative novel that teaches how small, consistent steps can lead to monumental success. This book unlocks the untapped potential of the mind, revealing hidden capabilities and inspiring readers to harness their full power. Thank you for watching Mafroor, known in English as Escapees.